The idea of civilization at odds with nature is one that cinema has returned to again and again over the years. And the 2020 animated fantasy adventure film Wolfwalkers is no exception. While it has drawn comparisons to the likes of 1997's Princess Mononoke, Wolfwalkers carves out a space of its own in its examination of this eternal conflict.
It can be tamed! Behold!
Avoid radioactive mist and rain, which the wind is blowing south from the river.
Wolfwalkers is the latest offering from Cartoon Saloon, an animation studio based in Kilkenny, Ireland. Set in 1650 during the Cromwellian conquest of Ireland, in the town of Kilkenny, it explores the relationship between civilization and nature. For many years, wolves roamed free in Ireland. In fact, they're an essential part of much of Irish folklore. However, when Oliver Cromwell conquered Ireland in around 1650, settlers from England and Scotland sought to exterminate the wolves in the area. This campaign continued for over a century, with the final recorded kill of a wolf occurring in 1786. In addition to the bounties placed on Irish wolves, Cromwell also waged war against Catholics, redistributing land to British Protestants and killing many priests and friars. The occupied Irish were expected to conform to English rule and all that came with it. Otherwise, they could very well be killed.
By God, you're one lucky girl. Did you not see? 'Twas a wolfwalker, Bikram.
Now calm down, will you?
Everyone knows you can't be cutting down their woods. If you do, they'll get you. Sure, that's the deal.
There's no deal with anyone.
St. Patrick made it with the old pagans, and you're breaking it, you Egypt.
We need to clear the woods.
The conflict at the heart of Wolfwalkers is also a culture war, with the Irish fighting to preserve their beliefs, while the English declare it all to be pagan nonsense. The film centers around the townspeople cutting down a nearby forest to use the land for farming, disrupting the animals who live there, most notably the wolves. Wolfwalkers' conflict between civilization and nature is expressed through both its story and its style. The story is about Robin, a young English girl whose father is tasked with exterminating the wolves that live in the forest outside of Kilkenny. When she sneaks out into the woods, she meets Maeve, a magical being who turns into a wolf when she sleeps, otherwise known as a wolfwalker. Despite her wolf bites seemingly being healed by Maeve's powers, Robin turns into a wolf that night and becomes a wolfwalker herself. The film follows Robin trying to convince Cromwell and the other townspeople to stop killing the wolves. With this, we see two opposing forces: the natural world, inhabited by Maeve and the wolves, and civilization, which threatens the wolf pack and nature with extinction. The style is an expressive mix of organic shapes and strict geometry, with a combination of clear, solid lines versus looser ones. There's also a distinct color contrast. The forest is vibrant and colorful, while the town is cold and dull. In this video, I'm going to break down how the visual style of Wolfwalkers reflects the dual worlds of the film, how it illustrates the differences between nature and civilization. To do this, I'm going to start small and get bigger, by talking first about how the film uses line, then shape, and then how these two elements function together, whether they're saying the same thing or, at times, working against each other. There's so much you can say with just a line. Wolfwalkers excels at communicating vast amounts of information through the lines on the characters and their environments. There are two types of lines in Wolfwalkers, and it's this contrast that represents the dichotomy between civilization and nature. In the forest, we see loose, expressive lines, while the town is solid, steady, and precise. The lines in the town convey strength, sure, but they're lacking the freedom that can be found in nature, the freedom that our characters eventually turn to. The lines used to illustrate the natural world are intentionally relaxed, but not necessarily sloppy. Maeve, for example, is made up of rough lines in both her human and wolf forms. She's almost charged with energy. It's also important to think about how these lines work within their environment. There's no clear separation between the characters and the world around them. The animals and people in the forest become one with nature. When Robin becomes a wolf, she learns how to be free and let herself go. Her lines become looser to reflect that. They're unrestricted, unrestrained. They capture the spirit of existing within the natural world, not outside of it. The opposite is true for the town. The lines used to illustrate civilization in Wolfwalkers are unwavering in their clarity. The characters are shut out from their environment, especially Oliver Cromwell, whose thick outline creates a shield of ignorance around him. The difference in line between the forest and the town show the opposition of these two worlds, nature and civilization. This distinction is best presented through the characters who shift between worlds. Take Robin and her father, for example, who both turn into wolves over the course of the film. When they're in the town, following the strict laws of society, they're drawn with solid lines. When they become wolves, however, running between trees and taking charge of their lives, the lines around them begin to loosen up. It's a small change, but it says a lot about where they exist in relation to the two worlds of wolfwalkers. While lines are an important part of characterizing an environment, what about the broader shapes that make up these characters and worlds? Shape in wolfwalkers works similarly to line. The identities of each realm are coded through the shapes that form them. The town is made up of harsh geometry. There are straight lines and sharp corners everywhere. We see it in Robin's house and on the streets of Kilkenny. I mean, look at the town as a whole. It's all contained within a giant rectangle. Just like the solid lines, the geometric shapes in the town reflect the restricting nature of civilization. This geometry is nowhere to be found in the forest, though. The natural world in wolfwalkers is organic. It's full of curves, with everything flowing together and becoming one. It isn't like the town, where everything is neatly boxed into a grid. Its trees, its animals, its people, it's all alive. The magical elements in the film are also made up of organic shapes, due to the connection between magic and nature. Maeve's healing spells are a great example of this. And when we see things through a wolfwalker's perspective, there are twisting paths coming off of every living being. For example, when Robin travels through the town at night, the curving trail she sees stands out against the angular rooftops. One way to examine wolfwalker's use of shape is through the character of Bill, Robin's father. When he's a human, his face is made up of straight lines and precise angles. It's very geometric. When he becomes a wolf, however, notice how the lines get looser, this new form is made up of organic shapes. The change in shape for Bill represents how he changes sides from civilization to nature, because the film has established the former as geometric and the latter as organic. Like with Bill's transformation, line and shape often work together in wolfwalkers. When both elements communicate the same thing, we get a more powerful illustration, embodying the two extremes of the nature-civilization relationship. Nature represents freedom. Often this is shown with loose lines and organic shapes being used simultaneously. Take Maeve, for example. Look at her in the woods, her natural habitat. The final shot of the film gives us a view of nature with loosely defined trees and characters outlined with soft pencil. Civilization is restricting. The town of Kilkenny is a grid of oppression. Its people are made up of squares and rectangles jutting out at odd angles. All of this is contained within thick, solid lines that offer no room to breathe. Kilkenny is contained. So, in order to represent the two worlds of the film, Wolfwalkers combines loose lines and organic shapes to reflect nature, and solid lines and geometric shapes to reflect civilization. One suggests freedom, the other oppression. Sometimes, line and shape say different things. This creates a more complex illustration and shows us that the divide between nature and civilization isn't actually all that neat. For example, while the town of Kilkenny is, for the most part, firmly on the side of civilization, if you take a closer look, this distinction becomes less clear. First, the walls. Kilkenny is surrounded by a high stone wall that separates it from the outside world. This is, without a doubt, a sign of civilization. Although, while this wall is man-made, it was constructed using an element of the natural world, stone. There are geometric shapes here. The wall is full of rectangles, but these shapes aren't contained within clearly defined lines. There's a mix of nature and civilization, indicating how no matter how much one tries to eradicate it, nature really is everywhere. In fact, it's part of the very foundation of the town. Next, the fire. I love the fire in Wolfwalkers. With the fire, there are loose, chaotic lines trapped within a geometric shape. Fire is an element of nature that has been tamed by humanity for various purposes. The constant containment of the fire, even as it rages, illustrates this idea. I also think it's interesting how the fire is a vibrant red. In the film, we usually see warm colors being used for the rich landscape, whereas the town is dull and muted. Co-director Ross Stewart said in an interview, One of the things that Cromwell did when he came to Ireland was to destroy a lot of the stained glass windows in the churches, because it was around that time when they didn't want any colors. Colors were too exciting, and colors were almost too lustful. So they smashed stained glass windows, they got rid of statues, they got rid of decoration. They wanted the whole church to be very plain and dull. Kilkenny is dull, but the fire isn't. The fact that the fire wielded by Cromwell is a bold, bright shade of red seems almost like a distortion of nature, twisting it in a way. In both of these examples, there's a conflicting use of line and shape. Are we looking at nature or civilization? So, Wolfwalkers doesn't necessarily establish its two worlds as completely separate. Rather, it shows how they can come together. This can be done in a positive way, the approach that Robin advocates for, or negative. These two examples show a negative relationship between man and nature. They demonstrate civilization taming nature and using it for its own benefit.
Tomorrow I will show you all. I will tame this land. I will find that den. Every last wolf will be destroyed.
No! Stop! There is another way! Release her, the Wolfwalker!
However, as Robin and Bill's story shows, a positive relationship between humans and nature is possible. Wolfwalkers also stresses the importance of working to understand one's perceived enemy, instead of immediately villainizing them out of fear.
Stay back!
What have you done?
Now, let's bring this all together and analyze the opening scene of Wolfwalkers. The first 3 minutes of the film establish the relationship between nature and civilization through the aforementioned strategies of line and shape. The film opens on several shots of nature. We see a variety of animals going about their daily lives in the woods. The shapes are all organic, with different objects flowing into each other due to the lack of clearly defined lines. The watercolor aesthetic helps as well, allowing the colors to bleed together. The opening shots characterize nature as a world of peaceful harmony. This peace is disrupted when an axe strikes a tree at the edge of the woods. The lines and shapes used to illustrate this tool make it clear that it's not a part of the natural world. This sets up the main conflict of the film. The townspeople are cutting down the trees in order to expand their land. Look at the stumps left behind. They're triangular. When a tree is cut down by humans, its connection to nature is severed as well. The men clearing the woods are also drawn with solid lines, boxing them into uncompromising shapes. The wolves, on the other hand, are outlined with chaotic pencil, again giving a sort of energetic charge to the creatures. The separation between these two worlds could not be clearer. The wolves are also terrifying. Remember, this is the beginning of the film. Nature is the enemy. Over the next 100 minutes, the characters, and the audience, will begin to understand this other side, and see that the wolves are not the vicious enemy that the Lord Protector attempts to frame them as. The wolves attack the man, but they're called away by a wolfwalker and her daughter, who heal him with magic. If we pause it here, we notice two things. One, the way the lines on the wolfwalkers differ from the lines on the man, and two, the organic shapes used for their magic. As the man runs off into town, check out those triangular tree stumps, we get a look at it for the first time. As opposed to the watercolor aesthetic of the forest, Kilkenny is depicted with a style reminiscent of woodblock printing. Co-director Tom Moore said in an interview, "The town is based on woodblock art and things from the time which are pamphlets that were being distributed. It was the early version of fake news and the internet. They were just printing these pamphlets distributed in England saying how awful the Irish were. Some of the woodblock was beautiful, but there were some really crude ones as well that they just bashed out, and that was kind of what we looked at for the town." The woodblock approach to the town of Kilkenny also reflects the townspeople's activities. I mean, the film literally opens with a man cutting wood from the forest. Everything comes from nature. The soldiers run out to fight the wolves, and the entire frame is full of cool colors, just blues and purples, save for the bright red of the fire. We also get our first peek at the buildings within the town. The rigidly organized geometric rooftops suggest uniformity, and, above all, conformity. With that, the war between civilization and nature has been illustrated in just 3 minutes, using differences in line, shape, as well as colors to introduce these two worlds at odds with one another. These sides will begin to overcome their differences, but this opening scene establishes them as strictly separate. The two worlds of Wolfwalkers are distinguished through a visual style that emphasizes differences in line and shape. Nature is shown with loose lines and organic shapes, as well as a watercolor aesthetic. These three elements work together to associate the natural world with energy, beauty, and freedom. Civilization is illustrated using solid lines and geometric shapes contained within a woodblock aesthetic that reflects the era. These elements mirror the oppression of Ireland under the English and how its people were closed off from the world around them. While these two worlds are undeniably different, the overall message of the film is one of togetherness, of reaching out and realizing that the other side might not be the enemy that your leader declares them to be.
Robin, what are you doing, girl? The Lord Protector will have us in chains!
He's wrong, Father. All this is wrong. Don't you see that?
Robin, step aside. We must do what we're told.
Why, Father? Why?
I'm afraid. I'm afraid.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't seen Wolfwalkers yet, first of all, sorry. You just got a bunch of things spoiled for you. But seriously, watch this film. I think it might be my favorite film from 2020. If you want more of these video essays, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any. My Twitter and Letterboxd are also linked below if you want even more of me. My name is Kaylin, also known as Kiki Craze, and thank you for watching.